Welcome to Real Talk, the podcast where I dive deep into the world of cinema, one director, one film at a time. I'm your host Josh, and today we're going to begin stepping into a world unlike any other. A world of flickering neon lights, whispering shadows, and the kind of dreams that stay with you after you've woken up. Today, we're beginning a brand new series on one of the most enigmatic, visionary, and downright mysterious directors of all time, David Lynch. Now, Lynch is a filmmaker who doesn't just tell stories, he crafts these entire worlds. But these worlds, they don't function the way we expect them to. They exist on the edges of reality, where time stretches, identities shift, and the most innocent, small-town street can hide something dark and unknowable just beneath its surface. His movies don't hold your hand or offer easy answers. They haunt you. They invite you to get lost inside them. And sometimes, just sometimes, you never find your way back out. For decades, Lynch has fascinated and frustrated audiences in equal measure. Some call him a genius, a master of cinematic dream logic. Others might say he's just plain weird. But no matter what, his films are impossible to forget. Maybe you first encountered his work through the unsettling suburban nightmare of Blue Velvet, or perhaps it was the hypnotic Hollywood fever dream of Mulholland Drive. Or maybe, like so many like myself, you stumbled upon Twin Peaks on TV, thinking you were about to watch a quirky small-town mystery, only to realize that what you were watching was something far, far stranger. For me, my experience with David Lynch was just that. I was young, about 12, and I happened upon Twin Peaks. I had no idea what was going on, but I knew I couldn't look away. And that's just something I couldn't shake. I had never seen that before. There wasn't just a single moment. It wasn't a single frame. Maybe it was an entire scene. I don't know. I just felt something shift. The way I saw this medium, television and movies, the way I understood storytelling, even the way I think about dreams and memory, it all started to change that day. And Lynch has that effect on people. His work lingers. It seeps into your subconscious. You may not always understand it, but you definitely feel it. And sometimes that's even more powerful. So today, before we start diving into each of his 10 feature films, we're going to start at the beginning. Who is David Lynch? Where did he come from? What shaped his mind and his art? And how did he become the legend that he is today? This is the life and mind of David Lynch. David Lynch's films often feel like dreams or maybe nightmares. They're stitched together from fleeting memories, half-formed thoughts, and the kind of eerie, inexplicable moments that linger in the back of your mind for years. His work is often described as exploring the dark underbelly of small-town America. But what makes that so compelling is that Lynch didn't grow up in a world of darkness and surrealism. He wasn't raised in some gothic mansion by eccentric artists, nor did he spend his youth surrounded by avant-garde thinkers. No, David Lynch was a boy from the suburbs, playing in backyards, riding his bike, and growing up in what seemed to be a postcard version of mid-century America. But even in the most picturesque settings, Lynch found something strange creeping in at the edges. There was always a sense that beneath the polite miles and the neatly trimmed lawns, something was lurking, something unspoken, something mysterious, something that would later become the foundation of his artistic world. David Keith Lynch was born on January 20th, 1946, in Missoula, Montana, a town that, much like the settings in his films, feels somewhat frozen in time. It's the kind of place where Main Street still has an old-fashioned soda shop, where people leave their doors unlocked, and where, at least on the surface, life follows a simple, predictable rhythm. But Lynch's early life wouldn't stay in one place for long. His father, Donald, worked as a research scientist for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, studying tree diseases and plant pathology, work that often took the family to remote, rural areas. This meant that Lynch's childhood was one of constant movement. From Montana, the family relocated to Sandpoint, Idaho, then Spokane, Washington, and eventually Alexandria, Virginia. These constant moves gave Lynch a broad and varied impression of American life. He saw the differences between small towns and cities, between the sleepy, woodsy neighborhoods of the Northwest and the more structured, suburban world of the East Coast. He absorbed it all, and perhaps most importantly, he noticed how, no matter where they lived, every place had its own peculiarities, its own sense of something lurking below the surface. Despite the frequent moves, Lynch often described his childhood as a happy one. He was a curious, imaginative kid who loved exploring the outdoors. He would wander through the woods, build forts, and get lost in the kind of unstructured, unsupervised adventures that kids of his generation could still have. But even in this idyllic setting, moments of strangeness had a way of seeping in. One story he told many times over the years is about a night in his childhood when he and his brother saw something that would haunt him forever. They were outside when they noticed a woman stumbling down the street, naked, bloodied, and visibly traumatized. She moved strangely, her body slack and lifeless in a way that didn't quite seem human. Lynch was just a child, but something about the moment filled him with an indescribable dread. The image of a wounded woman, of an inescapable horror interrupting the normalcy of everyday life, became a recurring motif in his work. Lynch never fully explains the memory. He doesn't know who she was or what happened to her, or why the moment affected him so deeply. But that's the essence of the Lynchian horror. It doesn't come from knowing, it comes from the unexplainable. The woman in distress, walking through the night, is a Lynchian moment before he even knew what that was. But even with these eerie experiences, Lynch's primary passion growing up wasn't film. It was painting. When the family moved to Alexandria, Virginia, Lynch entered high school. But by his own admission, he wasn't particularly interested in academics. School felt confining. What excited him was art. Specifically, the ability to create entire worlds on a canvas. He became obsessed with painting, fascinated by artists like Francis Bacon, whose grotesque, emotionally charged images would later influence the unsettling style of his films. After graduating high school, he had briefly attended the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, but it didn't feel right. The environment didn't inspire him, and within a year, he dropped out. He was restless, searching for something that felt real. That search led him to Philadelphia, where he enrolled at the Philadelphia Academy of Fine Arts. And it was there, in the crumbling industrial grid of 1960s Philadelphia, that David Lynch truly began to evolve as an artist. Lynch's years in Philadelphia were transformative. The city was nothing like the quiet suburban neighborhoods he had grown up in. It was rough, decaying, and filled with a kind of urban menace that unsettled him. Lynch has described his time there as dark and terrifying. He lived in a rundown neighborhood where violent crime was common, where he could hear screams in the night, and where the sense of unease was constant. And yet, he thrived artistically. He painted obsessively, creating images that were increasingly dark, distorted, and surreal. He was fascinated by decay, by the way time left its mark on buildings and faces, by the strange beauty that could be found in the grotesque. But still, something was missing. Then, one night, something happened. As Lynch sat in his studio, staring at one of his paintings, he had a sudden, almost supernatural moment of inspiration. In his own words, "I was sitting in my painting studio and looking at this painting of a garden at night. The painting was mostly black, but there was some green and it had a little wind moving in it. And I just heard a sound. And I thought, oh, a moving painting. That's it." That moment changed everything. What if paintings could move? What if they could have sound? What if he could capture the strange, shifting, unsettling quality of a dream, not just in a single image, but in a moving, living piece of art? This idea led to Lynch's first experiments with film. He started small, creating animated shorts that brought his paintings to life in eerie, hypnotic loops. His first real film project, 6 Men Getting Sick 6 Times, was essentially a moving painting, a looping, nightmarish sequence of 6 heads growing sicker and sicker as sirens wailed in the background. It was bizarre, it was unsettling, and it got attention. The film, it won an award at his school, and more importantly, it caught the eye of the American Film Institute, which offered Lynch a place at their newly established AFI Conservatory in Los Angeles. This was the moment that changed everything. At AFI, Lynch would begin work on his first feature film, the one that would define him, confound audiences, and launch his career as one of the most distinct filmmakers in history. And that film was Eraserhead. There's something almost mythical about the making of Eraserhead. It's the kind of story that feels like it could have been plucked straight from the eerie world of a Lynch film. Long, surreal nights spent filming in abandoned stables, friendships held together by a shared vision, and a director struggling to bring his nightmares to life with barely enough money to eat. It wasn't a movie that came together easily. It was built in fragments, piece by piece, across nearly 5 years. And yet, somehow, Eraserhead not only got finished, it became the film that launched one of the most enigmatic careers in cinema history. Now, David Lynch arrived at the AFI Center for Advanced Film Studies in the early 1970s. Fresh from his time at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, he had started dabbling in film as an extension of his painting, creating short, experimental pieces that moved like living abstract canvases. One of his shorts, 1970's The Grandmother, blended animation and live action in a way that also caught the attention of AFI, and it helped to land his spot in their prestigious program. At the time, Lynch still thought of himself primarily as a painter, but film was beginning to consume him in a way that other art forms never had. And it was there, in the halls of AFI, that Eraserhead was born. Now, at first, it was supposed to be a much shorter project, a 21-page script about a man stuck in this desolate, nightmarish world dealing with the overwhelming pressures of fatherhood. But as Lynch began working, the film started to take on a life of its own. Ideas twisted and evolved. Scenes that seemed simple became labyrinthine puzzles. The stark industrial aesthetic of the film was influenced by Lynch's own time living in Philadelphia, a city that, in his own words, felt like a sick, twisted, violent, fear-ridden dream. So what started as a small film turned into an all-consuming odyssey. The process was grueling, the budget was almost non-existent, and Lynch had to scrape together money just to keep going. He took odd jobs delivering newspapers, he worked as a janitor at AFI, and his friends pitched in, including Jack Fisk, who would later become a legendary production designer of his own, working with directors like Terrence Malick and Paul Thomas Anderson. But at the time, Fisk was just another young artist trying to make it. And he and his wife, actress Sissy Spacek, helped support Lynch financially when things got desperate. And things got desperate often. Production dragged on as Lynch meticulously crafted his vision. Some nights, he and his small crew would shoot only a few seconds of footage. Other times, they would spend hours setting up just for the light to fail at the wrong way and force them to start over. And now with no studio backing, no roadmap for what they were making, just a group of people following Lynch's instincts into the unknown. Well, Eraserhead was a film that existed in the margins of the industry, made by a director who was just as much an outsider as his film's protagonist. And then there was the personal weight of it all. Lynch was a new father at the time, and he's admitted that the anxieties of parenthood seeped into the DNA of the film. The world of Eraserhead is oppressive, industrial, decayed, and suffocating. The main character, Henry Spencer, drifts through the dystopian landscape with a shell-shocked expression, trapped in a life that he doesn't understand, and he's caring for a grotesque, wailing baby that looks like it crawled right out of a nightmare. Lynch has never confirmed exactly what the baby was made of, only that it was some sort of creation he built himself and animated frame by frame. So to this day, it remains one of the most unnerving practical effects in film history. But Eraserhead isn't just about the fear of fatherhood. It's about feeling alien in your own life, about the way the world can feel absurd and terrifying, mundane and surreal. Lynch has often said that Eraserhead is his most spiritual film. Though he's never really clarified exactly what that means, its sound design, filled with mechanical hums, industrial groans, and these eerie silences, it makes every scene feel like a waking dream. And the film's visual language, the stark black and white imagery, punctuated by the grotesque body horror, presents a world that's both familiar and at the same time it's utterly foreign. There is no easy explanation for what Eraserhead means. And that's part of what makes it so hypnotic. When it was finally finished in 1977, Lynch had no idea what kind of reception Eraserhead would get. It was weird, it was deeply unsettling, and unlike anything any audience had seen before. But something strange happened. People started showing up to late night screenings, and then they kept showing up. Eraserhead became a fixture of the midnight movie circuit in LA, where audiences sat stunned in silence or whispered to each other, trying to decipher the meaning. It was a film that got under people's skin. One of those people was Stanley Kubrick. There's a story that's never officially been confirmed, but it's widely believed that Kubrick once told his cast and crew on The Shining that Eraserhead was his favorite film. Whether or not that's true, Kubrick's admiration for Lynch's ability to create dread out of the ordinary was very real. Others took notice as well. Mel Brooks, yes, comedy Mel Brooks, was so impressed by Eraserhead that he handpicked Lynch to direct The Elephant Man, giving him his first major studio project. That unexpected endorsement launched Lynch from the underground into the Hollywood spotlight. But despite Eraserhead's success, Lynch himself remained something of a mystery. Was he an art house director? A horror filmmaker? A surrealist? His work refused to be pinned down, and that refusal to conform would define his entire career. Hollywood was intrigued, but also wary. No one quite knew what to do with him yet. What they did know was that Eraserhead had marked the arrival of a singular filmmaker, one who could transform the ordinary into something deeply unsettling, who could make the strange feel eerily familiar. And just like that, Lynch found himself on the doorstep of the mainstream. His next film would be The Elephant Man, a far cry from the grimy, dreamlike horror of Eraserhead. But the journey from underground filmmaker to Oscar-nominated director was just beginning. If there's one thing you can say about David Lynch's career, I think it's that it doesn't follow a straight line. His journey through Hollywood and independent filmmaking was anything but predictable. He made Oscar-nominated films. He's been chewed up and spit out by the studio system. He's created some of the most surreal TV ever aired and delivered quiet, emotional storytelling when no one expected it. His films exist somewhere between dreams and nightmares, between the poetic and the grotesque, and yet they all feel uniquely, undeniably Lynchian. So let's step into the cinematic dreamscape of David Lynch and explore how his career unfolded. Starting with the Hollywood anomaly, 1980s The Elephant Man. Imagine this. You're David Lynch. You've just finished Eraserhead, a deeply personal, disturbing, and completely bizarre film that took you 5 years to make. It's been a slow-burning success in the midnight movie circuit, but you're still just a guy struggling to find his place in the industry. Then out of nowhere, Mel Brooks, yes, Blazing Saddles' young Frankenstein Mel Brooks, sees Eraserhead and decides you are the perfect person to direct a biopic about a deformed man in Victorian England. Not exactly a natural leap, right? But Brooks, to his credit, saw something in Lynch's work. An ability to find beauty in the grotesque. A deep empathy beneath all the surreal horror. And so, with almost no experience in Hollywood, Lynch was given The Elephant Man. The film tells the tragic yet deeply human story of John Merrick, a man born with severe physical deformities who is exploited as a circus attraction before finding unexpected kindness and dignity. Now, despite this being a traditional biopic in some ways, Lynch couldn't help but leave his fingerprints all over it. The opening sequence, for example, is pure nightmare fuel, abstract imagery, industrial sounds, and surreal visions of Merrick's mother being trampled by elephants, as if Lynch was filtering reality through a dream. The gamble paid off. The Elephant Man was a huge success, earning 8 Academy Award nominations and proving that Lynch could work within a structured Hollywood system, at least for now. That's when the dream turns to dust with 1984's Dune. Coming off The Elephant Man, Lynch suddenly found himself in a very different world, the world of big-budget sci-fi. He had offers on the table, including a chance to direct Return of the Jedi, but he turned it down. Yes, he really did. Instead, he took on Dune, an adaptation of Frank Herbert's sprawling sci-fi epic. On paper, this sounds like a match made in heaven. Lynch's dreamlike sensibilities paired with Dune's mythical, otherworldly story. It could have been something truly special. But here's the problem. Dune was a studio project through and through. The producers wanted a Star Wars level blockbuster, and Lynch, well, he wanted to make something weirder, more abstract, more Lynchian. It didn't help that the film's script had to condense a massive, complex novel into just over 2 hours, leading to an overwhelming amount of exposition. The result? Well, it's a visually striking but narratively confusing film, filled with bizarre inner monologues, strange design choices, and a general sense of disjointed storytelling. The studio cut it down against Lynch's wishes, and when the film flopped, he essentially disowned it. To the very end, he refused to ever talk about Dune in interviews. But sometimes, failure leads to clarity. Dune made one thing clear to Lynch. He was not built for the Hollywood machine, and his next film would be an unfiltered return to his roots. Next, the Lynchian vision takes shape with 1986's Blue Velvet. With Dune behind him, Lynch needed to regain control of his artistic voice. The result was Blue Velvet, a film that is David Lynch in its purest form, suburban normalcy masking deep, unsettling horrors beneath. It starts with an image, a pristine white picket fence neighborhood, children playing, a father watering his lawn. But then he collapses. The camera zooms in past the blades of grass into the dirt below where beetles squirm and fight. That is Blue Velvet in a nutshell. What lies beneath the surface is far darker than you ever imagined. The film follows Jeffrey Beaumont, a college student who finds a severed ear in a field and gets drawn into a world of crime, obsession, and sadomasochistic desire. Dennis Hopper gives one of the most terrifying performances of all time as Frank Booth, a psychotic villain who breathes in gas and screams obscenities with terrifying unpredictability. While Blue Velvet wasn't a massive box office hit, it was a critical sensation. This was the film that cemented Lynch's reputation as a master of dreamlike horror and psychological unease, and led him directly to his next, even bigger cultural moment. And that's when television changed forever, thanks to Twin Peaks. When Lynch co-created Twin Peaks, television was a very different landscape. Procedurals, sitcoms, and straightforward dramas ruled the airwaves. Then Twin Peaks arrived, and suddenly, TV was weird. At first glance, it's a simple murder story. Who killed Laura Palmer? But as the episodes unfold, the show descends into a surreal, haunting dreamscape, filled with cryptic visions, doppelgangers, and terrifying entities like Bob and the Man from Another Place. It was unlike anything audiences had ever seen. The first season was a phenomenon. The second, well, when Lynch stepped away, the show lost its footing. The studio forced the mystery's resolution too soon and viewership declined. But in 2017, Lynch returned with Twin Peaks: The Return, a radical, almost avant-garde piece of television that proved he hadn't lost his touch. And then next up was the 90s experimental era, when he did Wild at Heart, Lost Highway, and A Straight Story. With Twin Peaks behind him, Lynch became even more unpredictable. First, in 1990, he made Wild at Heart, a hyper-violent road movie that won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. Then came Lost Highway in 97, a film about fractured identity that plays like a waking nightmare. And in the strangest twist of all, a twist only David Lynch could make, he followed that up in 1999 with The Straight Story, a quiet, G-rated drama about an elderly man traveling across the country on a lawnmower. No surreal horror, no cryptic dialogue, just raw human emotion. And then that's when Lynch took his final form with Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire. Because next up came Mulholland Drive, which many consider to be Lynch's masterpiece. Originally conceived as a TV pilot, something akin to Twin Peaks. But the film morphed into a dark, hypnotic tale of Hollywood dreams gone wrong. Naomi Watts gives an unforgettable performance as Betty, a bright-eyed actress who finds herself unraveling in a city filled with sinister forces. Mulholland Drive is terrifying, it's beautiful and utterly mystifying. It's been analyzed endlessly, with theories ranging from it's all a dream to it's purgatory. But like all of Lynch's work, it resists explanation. Again, it's meant to be felt, not understood. Then in 2006 came Inland Empire, which was probably his most abstract and challenging film. Shot entirely on digital video with a fragmented, almost impenetrable narrative, it was Lynch at his most unfiltered, and it would also be his last feature film. So David Lynch's career is a roller coaster of highs, lows, and strange detours. But no matter what, his work will always remain uniquely his own. He was a filmmaker who refused to compromise. He followed his instincts even when they led him into the unknown. And that's exactly what makes his films so completely unforgettable. And when our series kicks off in earnest, next episode, we will start where it all began, with Eraserhead. So let's talk about his other artistic endeavors. Because if you think David Lynch was just a filmmaker, you were only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface, he was an artist in the truest sense. Someone who didn't just tell stories through film, but through paint, music, photography, sculpture, and even the very essence of sound itself. His creativity refused to be confined to a single medium. Instead, it seeped into every aspect of his life, always carrying the unmistakable, Lynchian quality, something mysterious, unsettling, and strangely beautiful all at once. Lynch's approach to art wasn't about control, it was about discovery. He often said that ideas are like fish. You don't create them, you catch them. And for him, the best way to catch those deep, elusive fish was through intuition, sound, color, and atmosphere. So let's step away from the film reel for a moment and explore the other creative worlds Lynch built over the years. The places where his imagination ran free, unbound by narrative structure or cinematic conventions. So the painter who dreamed in motion. David Lynch never set out to be a filmmaker. As we mentioned, his first love was painting, and in many ways, film became an extension of that. I told you as a young man, he studied at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, where he immersed himself in texture, surreal imagery, and unsettling composition. He wasn't interested in painting pictures. He wanted to create moods, evoke emotions, and pull viewers into an experience. His paintings often depicted distorted human figures, decayed landscapes, and shadowy figures lurking just beyond clarity. They feel like frozen nightmares, as if something sinister had just happened, or is just about to. Many of them look like they could be snapshots from any one of his films, with dark smears of color bleeding into eerie, fragmented faces. Some are scrawled with cryptic phrases, their meanings just out of reach. But I think Lynch's defining artistic moment came one night in his studio. As he stared at a canvas, he had a vision, not just an image, but of movement. He imagined the painting breathing, shifting, and coming to life right before his eyes. That revelation changed everything. It was that moment that he began to experiment with animation. His earliest film that we mentioned, Six Men Getting Sick 6 Times in 1967, was exactly that. An animated painting, looping, evolving, pulsing with a strange organic life. That experiment was the first ripple of what would eventually become his filmmaking career. But painting never left him. Until the end, Lynch continued to paint, often in his signature raw, visceral style. His work has been exhibited worldwide, offering fans a deeper look into his subconscious. If you ever get the chance to see the paintings in person, I say you should do it. I know I will. Looking at them online, you can tell that they carry the same eerie energy as his films, like something familiar, but undeniably off. Something that stares back at you as much as you stare at it. The alchemy of sound. Now, if you've seen any David Lynch film, you know that sound is never just a background noise. It's a force of its own, shaping reality, distorting perception, and dragging you deeper into his world. The droning industrial hum of Eraserhead, the ominous wind in Twin Peaks, the warped static of a telephone in Lost Highway. These aren't just sound effects. They're living, breathing entities in the Lynchian universe. And Lynch didn't just use sound, he created it. His collaboration with sound designer Alan Splett in the 70s and 80s helped define the unique audio landscapes of his films. But beyond cinema, Lynch also explored sound as an art form. Over the years, he released several albums, blending atmospheric noise, moody blues, and distorted, half-whispered vocals. His 2011 album, Crazy Clown Time, is an eerie fever dream, a mix of spoken word storytelling and hypnotic instrumentals. Some tracks feel like transmissions from a haunted radio station, while others drip with an unsettling, slow burn tension. His follow-up in 2013, The Big Dream, dove deeper into his fascination with warped Americana. Bluesy melodies stretched and twisted into something alien. It's music that's not designed for easy listening. It's designed for immersion. For Lynch, sound was a portal, a way of bending reality and tapping into something deeper. The photographer of forgotten places. Another of Lynch's obsessions was photography, particularly images of decay, loneliness, and the eerie beauty of forgotten places. He spent years capturing abandoned factories, desolate streets, and weathered buildings. Places that felt like remnants of a lost world, echoes of something once alive, but now frozen in time. Much like his films, his photography found beauty in the eerie and the mundane. A cracked window, an empty hallway, a flickering neon sign. Lynch didn't just take pictures of these things. He found the strange energy that lingered around them. His 1993 book, Images, is a stunning collection of those photographs. It offers a glimpse into his visual obsessions outside of film. And there's a connection between Lynch's photography and his filmmaking. The industrial landscapes in Eraserhead, the lonely highways of Lost Highway, the ominous small-town Americana of Twin Peaks. They all stem from the same fascination with place, mood, and the unseen forces lurking beneath the surface. The power of meditation. If there's one thing Lynch credited above all else for his artistic inspiration, it's transcendental meditation. He discovered it in the early 1970s and practiced it daily the rest of his life. For him, meditation wasn't just a way to relax, it was a way to dive deep, to access creativity beyond conscious thought. Lynch often described creativity as an ocean. Most people only skim the surface, but through meditation, he believed he could plunge deeper into the vast and mysterious depths where the biggest, most beautiful ideas live. His passion for meditation led him to establish the David Lynch Foundation, which brings meditation programs to schools, veterans, and people suffering from PTSD. He believed that by quieting the mind, anyone can tap into limitless creativity. And looking at his body of work, it's hard to argue with him. An artist without limits. All of these artistic pursuits, painting, sound design, music, photography, and even meditation, are not separate from his filmmaking. They were its lifeblood. His films were not just stories, they were extensions of his artistic soul, experiments in mood, texture, and perception. Perhaps that's why Lynch never lost his edge. After decades in the industry, he continued to push boundaries, to explore new ideas, to challenge both himself and his audience. And that was never more clear than in 2017, when he returned to Twin Peaks for a new season that wasn't just a sequel. It was a radical reinvention of what television could be. Some called it frustrating, others called it genius. But one thing was certain, Lynch was still an artist unafraid to take risks. So when we talk about David Lynch, we're not just talking about a filmmaker. We're talking about an artist whose creativity spilled into every form imaginable. He didn't just tell stories, he built worlds, weaving together sound, image, and emotion into something utterly unique. Decades later, we're still trying to unravel his mysteries, still feeling the echoes of his work, still lost inside the dream that was David Lynch. As you can see, David Lynch was not just a filmmaker. He was an architect of dreams, a sculptor of subconscious fears, and a poet of the inexplicable. His work exists in a liminal space where the ordinary becomes unrecognizable, where reality distorts just enough to unnerve us, and where meaning is both elusive and omnipresent. To watch a Lynch film is to enter a world governed by its own peculiar rules. A world where the hum of an electrical current can be as ominous as a shadowy figure in the corner. where innocence and corruption are separated by the thinnest of veils, and where the line between nightmare and nostalgia is blurred beyond recognition. Lynch's films resonate not just because they mystify us, but because they tap into something deeply, almost universally human. We don't just watch his films, we feel them. That creeping sense of unease as Jeffrey Beaumont peers behind the curtain in Blue Velvet. The vertigo of identity that swallows us whole in Mulholland Drive. The haunting, cosmic sorrow of Agent Cooper whispering into the darkness in Twin Peaks: The Return. These are moments that defy simple explanation. Yet they burrow into our psyche, lingering like a half-remembered dream. But what is it about Lynch's work that keeps us coming back? Why, decades later, do we still dissect Lost Highway, searching for clues in its looping narrative? Why does Eraserhead, made on a shoestring budget over 5 painstaking years, continue to hold its place as one of the most hauntingly original films ever created? The answer lies in the very nature of Lynch's storytelling, his refusal to offer easy answers, his willingness to embrace ambiguity, and his ability to tap into the most primal corners of our minds. In Lynch's universe, the journey was more important than the destination, and the questions were often more revealing than any possible answers. But beneath all the surrealism and existential dread, there was something deeply compassionate in Lynch's work. His films are about more than just mystery and horror. They're about longing, about the fragility of identity, about love and loss and the search for meaning in an often incomprehensible world. The horror in his films is never horror for horror's sake. It is a reflection of the real darkness that lurks beneath the surface of our own lives. Whether in the seemingly perfect suburbs of Blue Velvet, or the sun-soaked, sinister streets of Mulholland Drive. And that's precisely what I'll be exploring in this series. Over the next 10 episodes, I'll be diving deep into Lynch's filmography, from the bleak, industrial purgatory of Eraserhead, to the fractured, digital fever dream of Inland Empire. I'll break down his use of sound, the way he turns silence into something deafening, the way a Roy Orbison song can suddenly become the most terrifying thing you've ever heard. I'll examine his reoccurring motifs, the flickering lights, the ominous red curtains, the strange, otherworldly figures who speak in riddles. And of course, I'll talk about the unforgettable performances from actors like Laura Dern, Kyle MacLachlan, Naomi Watts, and the unhinged brilliance of Dennis Hopper's Frank Booth. But more than anything, I'll embrace the mystery, because to analyze Lynch's work isn't to solve it, it's to let it wash over you, to feel the unease, to wonder, the beauty, and the horror in equal measure. Next time, we'll start at the beginning. Eraserhead, a film that Lynch once described as his most spiritual work. It's a film that defies explanation, a surreal nightmare of industrial noise, flickering lights, and a grotesque infant that may or may not be human. If you've never seen it before, prepare yourself. You may not understand it, but you'll never forget it. So buckle up, things are about to get weird. Until then, stay curious, stay strange, and keep watching great films.
Underneath the silver screen, gleam, gleam, talking reels and all their schemes. Dusty scenes and dreams unfold, stories told. night.